Now, most people recognize this character immediately. The patient one, the straight man, the character who exists to make someone else funnier. He is the grounded reality forced to exist in a world completely devoid of logic. And yet, this is the same character decades earlier. He was the star. Porky Pig wasn't designed to be a star, and he also wasn't designed to stop being one. He actually stumbled into both, and in between, he essentially saved the studio. So welcome back to Anthony's Animation Talk, and today we are looking at how Warner Brothers' biggest star became its most essential sidekick.
Hey, that wasn't in the script. Don't let it worry you, Skipper. I'm just a crazy, darn fool duck. Oh, knock it off.
But to understand how Porky became the star, we first have to understand the void he was created to fill. In the early 1930s, producer Leon Schlesinger wasn't running an animation studio at all. He was actually a middleman. He had an arrangement with the Harmonizing Studio. They produced the Bosco cartoons, and later on also the Merry Melodies, and then Schlesinger would sell them on to Warner Brothers. But by the time 1933 rolled around, Hugh Harman and Rudolph Ising had had enough. Budget disputes soured the relationship, and they walked, taking their marquee character Bosco with them. They briefly decamped at Van Buren Studios, but conflicts arose there too, and they eventually settled in at MGM. And that left Schlesinger with a problem. His entire business was supplying Warner Brothers with cartoons, and his supplier had just quit. And so Schlesinger built up an animation studio from the ground up, and he ended up staffing it with talent from various studios, some actually from the Harmonizing camp. So he took people like Friz Freleng and Bob Clampett, who would eventually become directors themselves, and even from Disney, he brought in director Tom Palmer and Jack King. Now he had a studio. What he didn't have was a star, so he mandated a replacement for Bosco, and the result was the legendary character, Buddy. Buddy was, to put it mildly, a dud. He was effectively a white-faced Bosco clone, completely devoid of charisma, and director Tom Palmer's initial Buddy cartoons were so poorly timed and so fundamentally unfunny that Schlesinger actually refused to release them. He fired Palmer, and he brought in Earl Duvall and Jack King to salvage the mess. The studio struggled to make Buddy work for 2 years. Yes, there were some highlights here and there, particularly the ones directed by Earl Duvall, but Schlesinger knew the math. These cartoons were just not gaining traction, and Schlesinger knew the math. If he didn't find a genuine hit soon, his animation division was facing total financial ruin, because even the Merry Melodies weren't exactly doing crash hot either. So desperate for a breakout, director Friz Freleng used 2-strip Technicolor and created the short I Haven't Got a Hat in 1935, as a literal character tryout. He essentially threw a handful of Our Gang style animal designs, and Our Gang was a movie series at the time featuring a whole bunch of kids getting into mischief, so you got the animal version of that here. And he threw a whole bunch of animal designs at the wall to see what would stick. And Schlesinger, along with a few others there, actually bet the house on Beans the Cat, pushing him as the star in a run of subsequent black and white shorts.
Who do you think you are?
Beans is the name. One of the Boston beans.
However, as what tends to happen in these sort of things, what the producers intended didn't end up actually happening. The audiences actually gravitated towards something else.
We will now open our exercises with a recitation by our little friend, Porky Pig.
A doughy pig in a turtleneck sweater nervously reciting The Midnight Ride of Paul Revere.
Listen, my children, and you shall hear the midnight ride of Paul Revere.
Porky stood out, and here's the thing, it wasn't because of his design per se, it was his distinct, genuine stutter. And by the way, while Porky would eventually become famous for his sign-op,
That's all, folks.
he didn't actually invent it. In I Haven't Got a Hat, that iconic That's All Folks was spoken by wooden jester Dummy,
That's all, folks.
and had done so in quite a few Merry Melodies before that. The studio only retrofitted that catchphrase to the pig later on once he broke out. So Beans and the rest of the crew that were featured in I Haven't Got a Hat were quietly dumped into the dustbins of animation history, with a few characters perhaps staying on in comic books, and that's pretty much it. Schlesinger went all in on the pig. Porky was a massive hit. Porky was the hit the studio needed desperately, but behind the scenes, that famous stutter was actually a production nightmare. The original voice actor, Joe Doherty, had a legitimate uncontrollable stutter.
If you sing it, a sad and blue song, go into your dance.
Here, my son, take our last dollar and buy them animals some feed.
And recording sessions dragged on for hours, burning through expensive audio tape just to get a single usable line, and as you can imagine, it was a financial drain. Worse, it ruined the comedic timing of the animation. Things got so desperate that the studio brought in Count Catelli, a legendary sound effects man from the silent era, just to augment and salvage some of Doherty's stuttering lines.
Well, you are not the chicken anyhow. You are Mr. Rooster.
Legendary sound editor Treg Brown even pioneered the technique of spinning up the voice track just to make the uncomfortable stutter sound cuter and more animated. And so the last short to feature Joe Doherty's stuttering voice was in Porky's Romance.
Tuna, I want you to be, well, that is, will you, may I, that is, won't you, will you, oh shucks, will you marry me?
And in 1937, in the short Porky's Duck Hunt, Mel Blanc took over the role. And Blanc fundamentally changed the character. With his background as a musician, Blanc turned the stutter into a controlled rhythmic device. He wasn't struggling to speak anymore, he was using the stutter for comedic timing, swapping synonyms on the fly.
Yes, sir. I'll take your bag, suitcase, your luggage. Hello, Mr. Schlesinger. Hello, Leon. Oh, son of a gun. You thought I was going to say son of a bitch, didn't you?
The floor had ended up becoming an instrument, and naturally the audiences were none the wiser at the time. But despite the vocal upgrade, Porky actually had a deeper problem. The audiences didn't know or cared at the time, but he did lack a core identity. Depending on the short, he was a child, he was a grizzled professional, he was a farmer, he was even a romantic lead.
Over there's a sight that's rare. Pals are playing fair. Something good will come from that.
He was essentially Mickey Mouse with a stutter, a nice guy with no internal conflict. As the 1930s closed, director Bob Clampett streamlined Porky's doughy design into his definitive, recognizable design. But Clampett's directorial style was built on manic hyperkinetic energy, and Porky was none of those things. And so before landing on the perfect formula, the studio tried pairing Porky with Gabby Goat. But Gabby was just loud and abrasive. In fact, Clampett actually hated Gabby so much that in Get Rich Quick Porky, he literally wrote the character out of the cartoon by having him burrow underground with a jackhammer.
What are you doing?
But here's the irony. Clampett spent the late 30s and early 40s using the exact same tactic on Porky, concocting every narrative excuse imaginable to knock him out, tie him up, get him off screen just so the wilder, funnier side characters could run the show. The eureka moment came with Porky and Daffy. In 1938, Clampett conceived it as a fight picture where Porky manages a puny, unhinged Daffy, and that codified the dynamic. Because the comedy landscape of the late 1930s was shifting rapidly, audiences were moving away from cute, passive characters and leaning towards chaotic, fast-talking wise guys.
Don't let me worry you, Chief. I'm just a trifle pixelated.
And the studio finally realized the truth about their pig. Porky worked best when he was trying to manage someone else's insanity.
Want to see me? Probably a salesman.
As the 1940s progressed, something quietly happened to Porky. His solo vehicle started drying up. Friz Freleng largely abandoned the character to focus on Bugs Bunny and Yosemite Sam, but Porky was also fighting a technological disadvantage, and this is where it gets kind of strange. Warner Brothers up until 1943 had a rigid divide. Merry Melodies were one-shot cartoons, initially black and white, but then 2-strip Technicolor, and then eventually 3-strip Technicolor. Looney Tunes were the character vehicles, all shot in black and white, completely for budgetary reasons. And because Porky was the anchor of Looney Tunes, he was contractually locked into black and white for years, while Bugs and then eventually Daffy were exploding in colour. And because his solo starring area was filled mostly in black and white, his shorts were subjected to the infamous 1968 Fred Ladd redrawn colorizations for television syndications. And these crude tracings butchered the original animation timing and layouts, and inadvertently buried Porky's early solo legacy for decades, until modern restorations finally rescued the original nitrate film scans. And this brings us to the turn, because the transition from star to sidekick wasn't a demotion, it was a realization of Porky's true utility. The straight man baton was passed from Clampett to Robert Bob McKimson.
Good night, fat boy. Buenos noches. What's bonus nachos? That's Spanish for bonsoir.
And also to Chuck Jones, who polished it to a shine in shorts like Robin Hood Daffy and Deduce You Say.
Trifle with me, will ya, you ruddy toaster mongers? A clue! Really, Holmes, you never cease to amaze me.
But if you want ultimate proof of Porky's value, look at Chuck Jones' Scaredy Cat Trilogy. In Scaredy Cat 1948,
Stop that! Give me the pistol. What do you think you're trying to do anyway? What a craven cat. Aren't you ashamed?
Cause for Alarm in 1954,
Wait, I can't breathe. What's going on? Hey.
and Jumpin' Jupiter in 1955.
Oh, this is what's troubling you, eh? If a shame. Well, I'm sorry, but you'll just have to return to your your wigwam, and we'll look at your rugs and trinkets in the morning.
Here, Porky is paired with Sylvester, and the entire comedic engine runs on creepy, atmospheric backgrounds, contrasting against Porky's blissful, cozy ignorance. While Sylvester is pushed to the absolute brink of madness by murderous mice or by aliens, while Porky remains completely oblivious. And that's the whole thing right there. It proved that Porky didn't just need Daffy. He was the necessary grounding rod for any chaotic element in the entire Looney Tunes universe. Porky's usability actually outlasted the classic theatrical golden age. He became the studio's reliable utility player. In 1979's Bugs Bunny Looney Christmas Tales, Porky was the only logical choice to play the optimistic Bob Cratchit, against Yosemite Sam's screaming Ebenezer Scrooge. So let's step back a little bit. So from 1935 to the modern day Looney Tunes cartoons that were released early in the 2020s, Porky Pig went through a lot. So he ended up becoming the star, and then he ended up becoming the sidekick. So while yes, Porky in the end ended up losing his starring status for the studio, overtaken by many other, let's face it, more exciting characters, not just Bugs Bunny and Daffy Duck, but characters like Foghorn Leghorn, Wile E. Coyote, and the Roadrunner, and many other characters in the stable, it was never really the tragedy it looked like. It was one of those little happy accidents that put Porky in the role he was always meant to be. By becoming the ultimate blank slate, the character secured his legacy as one of the most single indispensable characters Warner Brothers ever created. He didn't fall, he just settled into the role he was always meant to play. So thanks for watching. Let me know in the comments below, do you prefer the earlier solo Porky outings or the psychic Porky? But until next time guys, take care.
That's all, folks.